Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Rudolf Steiner. This is Christianity as a Mystical Fact and the Mysteries of Antiquity. We are on chapter 3, I believe. We are reading aloud, chapter 4. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box below, along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. Of particular note, more than likely, is going to be the Unconventional Bible Study, 161 videos where I detail how I came to hold the particular views that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration with Chapter 4, Plato as a Mystic. The importance of the mysteries to the spiritual life of the Greeks may be realized from Plato's conception of the universe. There is only one way of understanding him thoroughly. It is to place him in the light which streams forth from the mysteries. Plato's later disciples, the Neoplatonists, credit him with a secret doctrine which he imparted only to those who were worthy, and which he conveyed under the seal of secrecy. His teaching was looked upon as mysterious in the same sense as the wisdom of the mysteries. Even if the seventh Platonic letter is not from his hand, as is alleged, it does not signify for our present purpose, for it does not matter whether it was he or another who gave utterance to the view expressed in this letter. This view is of the essence of Plato's philosophy. In the letter, we read as follows. This much I may say about all those who have written, or may hereafter write as if they knew the aim of my work, that no credence is to be attached to their words, whether they obtain their information from me, or from others, or invented it themselves. I have written nothing on this subject, nor would anything be allowed to appear. This kind of thing cannot be expressed in words like other teachings, but needs a long study of the subject and a making oneself one with it. Then it is as though a spark leaped up and kindled a light in the soul, which thereafter is able to keep the light itself alight. This utterance might only indicate the writer's powerlessness to express his meanings in words, a mere personal weakness, if the idea of the mysteries were not to be found in them. The subject on which Plato had not written and would never write must be something about which all writing would be futile. It must be a feeling, a sentiment, an experience, which is not gained by instantaneous communication, but by making oneself one with it in heart and soul. The reference is to the inner education which Plato was able to give those he selected. For them, fire flashed forth from his words, for others, only thoughts. And that is true, right? I cannot give you the experience. We talk about that all of the time. I can merely relay it to you, and you have to go from there. I can tell you the means by which I have achieved the things which people are searching for. I have done that. But you don't have to believe me. I don't try to convince you. I merely tell you. You have to put it into practice. You have to do the prayer, the fasting, and the meditation. You have to do the energy work. You have to do this shadow work. You have to dig out all of the nasty things for yourself. I can't do that for you. I can merely tell you about the process. But once it is started, once the awakening starts, there's no turning back from that. It's like coming out of the cave and you're seeing all of the things that are real. You can't go back once you know the things. It's just not a possibility. So it's something that you should consider before you begin. But once it has begun, it takes on a life of its own. The more you practice it, the more it becomes a reality. And the more you understand that it always was the reality. You were living in the illusion. The manner of our approach to Plato's dialogues is not a matter of indifference. They will mean much more or less to us according to our spiritual condition. Now, if you would like to see some more Plato, we have covered him in the Ancient Lore playlist. We have dealt with several of the dialogues. We have dealt with Timaeus and Critias. We dealt with the entirety of the Republic. So there's a good bit of Plato to dig through if that is your type of thing. There is definitely things to learn from those studies. Much more passed from Plato to his disciples than the literal meaning of his words. The place where he taught his listeners thrilled in the atmosphere of the mysteries. His words awoke overtones in higher regions which vibrated with them, but these overtones needed the atmosphere of the mysteries or they died away without having been heard. That is obviously some self-insertion dramatization going on right there. Right? He was not there in the time of Plato. Obviously, it was not recorded. Any of the things that happened to deal with the mysteries from Plato. We just read that. And so this is obviously a self-insertion, right? This is an attempt to dramatize, to lend a little more gravity to the effect. And while these things probably did happen, there's no way to know that or to even track that, right? The vibrations on the higher planes, you don't really see them. It is something that you feel, and it is an experience, and again, that cannot be relayed. So, yeah. In the center of the world of the Platonic dialogues stands the personality of Socrates. We need not here touch upon the historical aspect of that personality. It is a question of the character of Socrates as it appears in Plato, and again, we have covered that in some extensive detail. Socrates is a person consecrated by his dying for truth. He died as only an initiate can die, as one to whom death is merely a moment of life, like other moments. He approaches death as he would any other event in existence. His attitude towards it was such that even in his friends, the feelings usual on such an occasion were not aroused. Plato says this in the dialogue on the immortality of the soul. Truly, I found myself in the strangest state of mind. I had no compassion for him, as is usual at the death of a dear friend. So happy did the man appear to me in his demeanor and speech, so steadfast and noble was his end, that I was confident that he was not going to Hades without a divine mission, and that even there it would be as well with him as it was as with anyone anywhere. No tender-hearted emotion overcame me, as might have been expected at such a mournful event. Nor, on the other hand, was I in a cheerful mood, as is usual during philosophical pursuits, and although our conversation was of this nature, but I found myself in a wondrous state of mind and in an unwonted blending of joy and grief, when I reflected that this man was about to die. The dying Socrates instructs his disciples about immortality. His personality, which had learned by experience the worthlessness of life, furnishes a kind of proof quite different from logic and arguments founded on reason. It seems as if it were not a man speaking, for this man was passing away, but as if it were the voice of eternal truth itself, which had taken up its abode in a perishable personality. Where a mortal being is dissolving into nothing, there seems to be a breath of the air in which it is possible for eternal harmonies to resound. We dealt most especially with the death of Socrates. He was convicted for telling the truth. He was convicted for trying to spread knowledge. He did nothing against the laws, but he was still convicted and went willingly to his death with the understanding that the soul is immortal, right? It was somewheres prior to being here. It will go somewheres after here, and we are here for this experience. And Socrates was all about this experience. Don't let this fool you, right? Learn by experience the worthlessness of life. That is not what he said. He embraced life. He enjoyed life. Now, did he have arguments with people? All the time. He was calling them out on their bullshit all the time, but he enjoyed life. He went and visited places and took parts in festivals. He enjoyed the pleasures of the flesh for sure. He had got married at a late age and raised children. He had a home and family. He did not think that life was worthless, but he was more than willing to meet his death to stand for truth, and that is a big deal. Right? It wasn't about, oh, my life is worthless, I go willingly into the ashes. It was, I would rather die than do the wrong thing. That is an enormous difference in scale and scope there. That is a completely different thing than what is being intimated in this particular passage. This sounds like he is just accepting it, and That's not exactly how it went down. We hear no logical proofs of immortality. The whole discourse is designed to lead the friends where they may behold the eternal. Then they will need no proofs. Would it be necessary to prove that a rose is red to one who has one before him? Why should it be necessary to prove that spirit is eternal to one whose eyes we have opened to behold spirit? Experiences, inner events. Socrates points to them, and first of all to the experience of wisdom itself. What does he desire who aspires after wisdom? He wishes to free himself from what the senses offer him in everyday perception. He seeks for the spirit in the sense world. Is not this a fact which may be compared with dying? For, according to Socrates, those who occupy themselves with philosophy in the right way are really striving after nothing else than to die and to be dead, without this being perceived by others. If this is true, it would be strange if, after having aimed at this all through life, when death itself comes, they should be indignant at that which they have so long striven after and taken pains about. No. Wanting to understand what is going on does not necessarily mean that you are longing for it, right? I seek to know what's going on, but I love my life. I'm here for that, right? I'm here for the experiences of it. So, wanting philosophy, right? It's not striving after nothing else than to die and be dead. If so, then you are doing it completely wrong. And I don't care if you're Socrates or Plato. Now, I don't remember reading this in the particular works that we did. We did not do all of them, so it's possible that this is in there, but this is not the tone and the tenor of all of the ones that we read. Right? All of the ones that we went through together, it was not this. It was talking about eternity, absolutely, but not striving for death. That was not what was intimated in any of those books or any of those writings. To corroborate this, Socrates asked one of his friends, "Does it seem to you befitting a philosopher to take trouble about the so-called fleshly pleasures such as eating and drinking, or about sexual pleasures? And do you think that such a man pays much heed to other bodily needs, to have fine clothes, shoes, and other bodily adornments? Do you think he considers or scorns this more than utmost necessity demands? Does it not seem to you that it should be a man's whole preoccupation not to turn his thoughts to the body, but as much as possible away from it and towards the soul? Therefore, this is the first mark of the philosopher, that he, more than all other men, relieves his soul of that association with the body." Now, again, not knowing the context of this, but this part right here, this entire section right here, Socrates was entirely consumed with this in large part for large sections of his life. He was not discriminate about who he shared his sexual pleasures with. As a matter of fact, he was quite indiscriminate. He spent a good deal of time eating and drinking. He was a very large man, and that doesn't happen because you don't eat, right? He spent his time wrestling. He was a soldier at one point, but he was a prolific lover of whoever would do it. And that is quite evident if you read through any of the Plato works. And so, again, not knowing the context of this seems like he was probably calling someone else out. He talked about these things, he did, quite extensively, but that doesn't mean that this is correct, right? At least from what I have read of him, it does not, right? He was very much concerned with the fleshly pleasures. Now, was it the consumption of his life? No, right? His consumption of his life was calling out people. That's what he lived for. He would wander around and somebody was like, "I know more than you," and he'd be like, "Okay, well, answer this question," and then answer this question, and he would slowly pick apart their argument through the Socratic method, right? By saying, "Well, what do you say about this?" And then they have to answer, and then he said, "Well, that's a little contradictory. What about this?" And they say, "I have to answer that." And it's like, that's extremely contradictory. That was the type of thing that he did. But he was concerned about the fleshly pleasures. And any denial of that is not reading. On this subject, Socrates has something more to say. An example, that aspiration after wisdom has this much in common with dying, that it turns man away from the physical. But whither does he turn? Towards the spiritual. But can he desire the same from spirit as from the senses? Socrates thus expressed himself on this point. But how is it with reasonable knowledge itself? Is the body a hindrance or not, if we take it as a companion in our search for knowledge? I mean, do sight and hearing procure man any truth? Or is what the poets sing meaningless, that we see and hear nothing clearly? When does the soul catch sight of truth? And when it tries to examine something with the help of the body, it is manifestly deceived by the latter. And again, I would have to know the full context, because this, again, seems like something he was calling someone out on. Right? And that's an important thing. Like, he took the contrary position on several things just to be contrary. Everything of which we are cognizant by means of our bodily senses appears and disappears. And it is this appearing and disappearing which is the cause of our being deceived. But when, with our reasonable intelligence, we look deeper into things, the eternal element in them is revealed to us. Thus, the senses do not offer us the eternal in its true form. The moment we trust them implicitly, they deceive us. They cease to deceive us if we confront them with our thinking, insight, and submit what they tell us to its examination. But how could our thinking insight sit in judgment on the declarations of the senses, unless there was something living within it which transcends sense perception? Your senses can be fooled, right? That isn't a real thing. If you have a car crash and there are 10 people standing around and they are all witnesses, you're going to get 10 completely different accounts of what happened. Somebody is going to remember it a little bit differently than somebody else every single time, even though they've seen the exact same thing. Some of it is trying to be helpful, some of it is trying to be deceitful, some of it is simply not understanding what you actually saw. But that happens all the time. You mishear the intention of something that somebody said. So yes, the sense perceptions do indeed deceive you. You don't actually ever see anything. We talk about that quite often. You see the reflection of things. And what you consider a color is actually the absence of that color in that thing. I use my phone case all of the time. It is a nice pretty blue. But there is no blue in the phone, right? There's no blue in this phone case. It is the absence of blue that you see. Every other color is absorbed by the actual colors that are in the phone, and it reflects the one color that it doesn't have, blue. Therefore, the truth or falsity in things is decided by something within us which opposes the physical body, and is consequently not subject to its laws. First of all, it cannot be subject to the laws of growth and decay, for this something contains truth within it. Now, truth cannot have a yesterday and a today. It cannot be one thing one day and another the next, like objects of sense. Therefore, truth must be something eternal. And when the philosopher turns away from the perishable things of sense and towards truth, he is turning towards an eternal element that lives within him. If we immerse ourselves wholly in spirit, we shall live wholly in truth. The things of sense around us are no longer present merely in their physical form, and he accomplishes this most perfectly, says Socrates, who approaches everything as much as possible with the spirit only, without either looking round when he is thinking or letting any other sense interrupt his reflecting, but who, making use of pure thought only, strives to grasp everything as it is in itself, separating it as much as possible from eyes and ears, in short, from the whole body, which only disturbs the soul and does not allow it to attain truth and insight when associated with the soul. Now, is not death the release and separation of the soul from the body? And it is only true philosophers who are always striving to release the soul as far as they can. This, therefore, is the philosopher's vocation, to deliver and separate the soul from the body. Therefore, it would be foolish if a man who all his life has taken measures to be as near death as possible should, when it comes, rebel against it. In truth, the real seekers after wisdom aspire to die. And of all men, they are those who least fear death. Yes and no, right? Like I have no fear of death. I don't run towards it. I'm not welcoming it, but I'm not going to be mournful when my time to pass comes. I say that with the full confidence of someone who is in somewhat good health, right? It's not like I am imminently on the edge and then it's an actual matter to consider. But I've spent a good deal of time thinking about it. I'm somebody who had tried to go home early, right? I did. When I was a teenager, I tried several times to take myself out and it didn't work. And so I have a little bit different viewpoint on it than some other people for that. And then I have been somebody who desired it greatly outside of that, and it didn't happen. But now that I'm actually pursuing philosophy in earnest, which is definitely something that you can say about me, I don't rush towards it. I don't fear it anymore at all. I have zero fear of an eternal damnation. That's just simply not a thing. I think that when I return to Source, it's going to be a wonderful thing. But I'm here now for the experience of now. Right? I spend an awful lot of time alone. I spend time reading to the internet. I spend time developing a game. I spend a lot of time locked up in my head. I think about a lot of things, but I enjoy it. It is not something that, like, I'm not locked away contemplating things of misery. It's things of joy. It is things that bring me happiness in my life. And so I don't fear death. There's no fear. But it's not something that I run towards, right? I'm not even taking measures to be as near as death as possible. No, I'm kind of doing the opposite. I'm trying to eat right. I'm trying to do some exercise. I'm trying to take care of myself in a variety of ways so that I can be here a little bit longer in a healthy manner because I'm enjoying life. True philosophy brings you a joy of life. It takes away the fear of death, but it brings you a joy of life because then you understand why we are here and what we are doing. And that makes all the difference in the world. Moreover, Socrates bases all higher morality on liberation from the body. That is foolish. He who only follows what his body ordains is not moral. That is definitely something to debate about. Who is valiant? Asked Socrates. He is valiant who does not obey his body, but the demands of his spirit when these demands imperil the body. And who is temperate? It is not this he who does not let himself be carried away by desires, but who maintains an indifferent and moral demeanor with regard to them. Therefore are not those alone temperate who set least value on the body and live in the love of wisdom? And so it is, in the opinion of Socrates, with all the virtues. We talk about these virtues all the time. You can overtake virtues. You can be so charitable that you give away everything. You can be so chaste that you never experience love. You can be so humble that you never take pride in any of your accomplishments. Those are terrible things. You are meant to have pride in a job well done. You are meant to accumulate wealth. Not necessarily excessive wealth that you can't ever possibly spend, right? But you should be comfortable. You should have a house. You should have food. You should be able to pay your bills. That is perfectly fine. You're not meant to give away everything you own. Anybody who is telling you that is telling you wrong. You are meant to find the balance between the virtues and the vices, between greed and charity. Don't be so greedy that you just hold on to everything, but don't be so charitable that you give it all away. Find the balance. Give some away and keep some of it. That is the balance. You're not meant to be so lascivious that you are throwing your genitals at everything that moves, nor are you meant to be so chaste that you never throw your genitals at anything that moves. You're supposed to find that one person that you are supposed to spend your life with and enjoy the copulation thereof. It is about balance. Anyone who is telling you it is about exclusion is telling you incorrectly. And I don't care who they were or how long ago they lived. I don't care how much they thought about it. I don't care. It is the goal of life to be balanced. Thence, Socrates goes on to characterize intellectual cognition. What is it, after all, to cognize? Undoubtedly, we arrive at it by forming judgments. I form a judgment about some object, for instance. I say to myself, what is in front of me is a tree. How do I arrive at saying that? I can only do it if I already know what a tree is. I must remember my conception of a tree. A tree is a physical object. If I remember a tree, I therefore remember a physical object. I say of something that is a tree, if it resembles other things which I have previously observed and which I know to be trees. Memory is the medium for this knowledge. It makes it possible for me to compare the various objects of sense, but this does not exhaust my knowledge. If I see two similar things, I form a judgment and say, these things are alike. Now, in reality, two things are never exactly alike. I can only find a likeness in certain respects. The idea of a perfect similarity, therefore, arises within me without having its correspondence in reality. And this idea helps me to form a judgment, as memory helps me to form a judgment into knowledge. Just as one tree reminds me of others, so I am reminded of the idea of similarity by looking at two things from a certain point of view. Thoughts and memories, therefore, arise within me which are not due to physical reality. All kinds of knowledge not borrowed from sense reality are grounded on such thoughts. The whole of mathematics consists of them. He would be a bad geometrician who could only bring into mathematical relations what he can see with his eyes and touch with his hands. Thus, we have thoughts which do not originate in perishable nature, but arise out of the spirit. And it is these that bear in them the mark of eternal truth. What mathematics teach will be eternally true, even if tomorrow the whole cosmic system should fall into ruins and an entirely new one arise. Conditions might prevail in another cosmic system to which our present mathematical truths would not be applicable, but these would be nonetheless true in themselves. And I'm going to pause right here just to talk for a minute that people believe that math is incorrect. I find that completely wild. I know Terrence Howard has got a whole lot of people thinking about a different way to look at math, and for the most part, that is somewhat correct, but 1 plus 1 does not equal 3, ever, in any reality. You can extrapolate and hypothesize situations in which it might, but that is simply you changing the terms and conditions of mathematics. It doesn't mean that the math is wrong, right? 1 plus 1 is 2, and it will be always and forever. There is no circumstance in which it is actually 3. Despite that, people still believe it, just the same way that people believe that the earth is flat, even though it has been proven time and time again that it is not, that you can go and make the experiments yourself. Every time one of these flat earthers go to make a video disproving the sphere that is the earth, the actual globe, they're proven wrong every single time, and yet people still believe it. It's the same with this mathematics that aren't, right? And I just had a comment the other day, that's why I'm bringing it up. Like, he's like, nobody's gotten math right. And it's like, no, you were wrong. You were just wrong. It is only when the soul is alone with itself that it can bring forth these eternal truths. It is at these times related to the true and the eternal, and not to the ephemeral and apparent. Hence, Socrates says, when the soul, returning into itself, reflects, it goes straight to what is pure and everlasting and immortal, and like unto itself. And, being related to this, cleaves unto it when the soul is alone and is not hindered. And then the soul rests from its mistakes and is like unto itself, even as the eternal is, with whom the soul is now in touch. This state of soul is called wisdom. Look now whether it does not follow, from all that has been said, that the soul is most like the divine, immortal, reasonable, unique, indissoluble, what is always the same and like unto itself, and that on the other hand the body most resembles what is human and mortal, unreasonable, multiform, soluble, never the same nor remaining equal to itself. If therefore this be so, the soul goes to what is like itself, to the immaterial, to the divine, immortal, reasonable. There it attains to bliss, freed from error and ignorance, from fear and undisciplined love, and all other human evils. There it lives, as the initiates say, for the remaining time truly with God. That is only the awakened soul. The other souls are in complete disarray. Right? It is easy to extrapolate that the pure form of the soul is the best divine version of it, but why is it here? It is here to learn, right? You, the individualized piece of God that is residing inside of the temple and navigating 5D space, you are here to be different. You are here to be slightly different than the person who is closest to you. You can be 99% aligned, and that 1% makes all of the difference in the world. To assume that that differentiation is not part of the process, which is what is being done here, is a little bit silly. Is the highest state of your soul to be like the divine? Yes. But that is where you will get on the other side of life, and you won't get there here. You can try, you can strive for it, but that sets you apart from most souls. Most souls are not doing that. They are having their experience, but they are not taking on the deeper questions in the manner that we do here. Right? Most souls are simply striving to live, and that's not striving to be the divine. It is not striving to be infallible. They're just living their life, and that is the intention of their soul. And your soul is here to learn things. It is here to choose better, absolutely. But sometimes that doesn't work out that way. And it is important to remember that, right? It is important to remember that even on their journey, they are still exactly where they're supposed to be. Do you hope for them to get better? Absolutely. But if they don't, that's their journey, and that's where they're supposed to be. Right? Now, you can make the argument for this for philosophers. You can make the argument for this for people who are actively seeking the greater knowledge, but you can't make it for every single soul. It is not within the scope of this book to indicate all the ways in which Socrates leads his friends to the eternal. They all breathe the same spirit. They all tend to show that man finds one thing when he goes the way of transitory sense perception, and another when his spirit is alone with itself. It is to this original nature of spirit that Socrates points his hearers. If they find it, they see within their own spiritual eyes that it is eternal. The dying Socrates does not prove the immortality of the soul. He simply lays bare the nature of the soul. And then it comes to light that growth and decay, birth and death have nothing to do with the soul. The essence of the soul lies in the true, and this can neither come into being nor perish. And again, I vehemently disagree with this. Right? The point of the soul, the essence of the soul, is to learn. Right? And while you can make the argument that the essence does lie in the true. Okay, yes, it came from the divine. That is true. That is its essence. But it is here for a reason. He does not prove the immortality of the soul. That is true. He lays bare the nature of his soul. His soul was standing for truth. His soul was seeking what was right, the greater knowledge, the more truth. That's what he was doing, but it's not everyone. The growth, decay, birth, and death have nothing to do with the soul is fucking foolish. That is a child's argument. I wish I could stand in front of him and tell him that. The birth and death, the growth and decay have everything to do with your soul. 100% of your soul's destiny is entailed with growth and decay, birth and death. You are meant to be here. You are meant to learn here. Yes, you are going to die. That is a fact. But your life is not to be consumed with what will happen after the death. It is to be here in your birth. Up until your death, you are here to grow and sometimes decay. Yes, that is 100% of the intention of you being here. Growth and decay, birth and death, that is intrinsic to the journey of the soul. The soul has no more to do with the becoming than the straight has to do with the crooked. That is. But death belongs to the becoming. Therefore, the soul has nothing to do with death. Wow. Must we not say of what is immortal, that it emits immortality as little as does the straight of the crooked? Starting from this point, must we not ask, adds Socrates, that if the immortal is imperishable, is it not impossible for the soul to come to an end when death arrives? That is true. The soul does not die, you die. The temple dies. The soul moves on. From what has been already shown, it does not admit of death, nor can it die any more than 3 can be an even number. Let us review the whole development of this dialogue in which Socrates brings his hearers to behold the eternal in human personality. The hearers accept his thoughts, and they look into themselves to see if they can find in their inner experiences something which assents to his ideas. They make the objections which strike them. What has happened to the hearers when the dialogue is finished? They have found something within them which they did not possess before. They have not merely accepted an abstract truth, but they have gone through a development. Something has come to life in them which was not living in them before. Is not this to be compared with an initiation? And does not this throw light on the reason for Plato setting forth his philosophy in the form of conversation? These dialogues are nothing else than the literary form of the events which took place in the sanctuaries of the mysteries. We are convinced of this from what Plato himself says in many passages. Plato wished to be, as a philosophical teacher, what the initiator into the mysteries was, as far as this was compatible with the philosophical manner of communication. It is evident how Plato feels himself in harmony with the mysteries. He only thinks he is on the right path when it has taken him where the mystic is to be led. He thus expresses himself on the subject in Timaeus. All those who are of right mind invoke the gods for their small or great enterprises, but we, who are engaged in teaching about the universe, how far it is created and uncreated, have the special duty, if we have not quite lost our way, to call upon and implore the gods and goddesses that we may teach everything first in conformity with their spirit, and next in harmony with ourselves. And Plato promises those who follow this path that divinity, as a deliverer, will grant them illuminating teaching as the conclusion of their devious and wandering researches. We have indeed dealt with Timaeus, and I think I have a better explanation of that over there. It is especially the Timaeus that reveals to us how the Platonic cosmogony is connected with the mysteries. At the very beginning of the dialogue is a mention of an initiation. Solon is initiated by an Egyptian priest into the formation of the worlds, and the way in which eternal truths are symbolically expressed in traditional myths. There have already been many and various destructions of part of the human race, says the Egyptian priest to Solon, and there will be many more in the future, the most extensive by fire and water, the lesser ones through countless other causes. It is also related in your country that Phaethon, the son of Helios, once mounted his father's chariot, and, as he did not know how to drive it, everything on the earth was burnt up, and he himself slain by lightning. This sounds like a fable, but it contains the truth of the change in the movements of the celestial bodies revolving around the earth, and the annihilation of everything on the earth by much fire. This annihilation happens periodically after the lapse of sudden, long periods of time. This passage in the Timaeus contains a plain indication of the attitude of the initiate towards folk myths. He recognizes the truth hidden in their images. Okay, we're going to talk about this. This was a revelation. This was a revealing. This was him telling you in no uncertain terms that the earth goes through cycles of change. Great, extensive cycles of change. We have the 12,000 year disaster cycle, which is one of the videos on this channel. It is part of this, where we talk about these changes, how there is a cyclical pattern. It is a 12,000 year repeating pattern with a 6,000 year alternate. There is a hot destruction and a wet destruction. Hot at 12,000 years, wet at 6,000 years, and then at 0, which is where we are right now, we're going to get another hot one. The hot one is fire and lightning. It comes and it scorches and burns the earth and destroys most of life. The wet one is a flood. We've got it recorded in several places about 6,000 years ago. It is absolutely a statement of fact that he is talking about here. This is not an initiation. This was a revealing of a historical truth. The priests in Egypt all knew this. This was not something restricted simply to the priest class. It was common knowledge in Egypt at the time of Solon. He went there and received this information freely with no expectation of an initiation. We have dealt with Timaeus. And so it is important to note that what he is saying here is not an allegory. This is not something hidden. This is not some deeper mystery. This is a truth that has been hidden from us since then. But back then it was just knowledge. It was something that was known. The story of Phaeton is literally telling us about the sun doing something that is going to destroy large parts of the earth. That it has happened before and it will happen again. This is reminding us that there is indeed a cycle. We are in the middle of the cycle. We're not in the middle. We're about at the end of the 12,000 year greater cycle. And I know there are people who do not believe that. That's fine. There are a lot of things I say that people do not believe. But go back and watch the 12,000 year disaster cycle where I lay out the evidence. Or I allow other people to lay out the evidence who are much more qualified at it than I am. Right? I talk about things in there, I do, but Randall Carlson explains part of it to you, and the Thunderbolts Project explains part of it to you. It is a thing which is going to happen. That is what I call the bottleneck, right? We are coming up again on the hot one. The hot one means that it's going to be hot. There will be fire. There will be sheets of lightning. Not a bolt of lightning, but sheets miles wide that are going to come and strike the earth and cause great changes in the topography of the planet. It will not be a good time to be hiding in the mountains. And again, if you want more information on that, the 12,000 year disaster cycle will definitely get you there, but so will Timaeus and Critias, where we talk as we went through Plato in the way that we are doing here. The drama of the formation of the world is brought before us in the Timaeus. No. The drama of the changing of the world is brought before us in Timaeus, not the formation. That is a significant difference. And formation here is intentionally self-inserting your doctrine into what has been recorded as historical truth. He said that there was a cycle, that it has happened repeatedly over an extensive amount of time, not that there was this one formative event. Anyone who will follow up the traces which lead to this formation of the cosmos arrives at a dim apprehension of the primordial force from which all things proceeded. Now it is difficult to find the creator and father of the universe, and when we have found him, it is impossible to speak about him so that all may understand. The mystic knew what this impossibility means. It points to the divine drama. God is not present in what merely belongs to the senses and understanding. In those, he is only present as nature. He is under a spell in nature. Only one who awakens the divine within himself is able to approach him. Thus, he cannot at once be made comprehensible to all, but even to one who approaches him, he does not appear himself. That is true. But Timaeus says that also. The Father made the universe out of the body and soul of the world. He mixed together, in harmony and perfect proportions, the elements which came into being when he, pouring himself out, gave up his separate existence. Thereby, the body of the world came into being, and stretched upon it, in the form of a cross, is the soul of the world. No. That is again another self-insertion. This right here is not part of it. It is what is divine in the world. It found the death of the cross so that the world might come into existence. Plato might therefore call nature the tomb of the divine, a grave, however, in which nothing dead lies but the eternal. to which death only gives the opportunity of bringing into expression the omnipotence of life. And man sees nature in the right light when he approaches it in the order to release the crucified soul of the world. That is an astounding level of self-insertion, right? The crucified soul of the world is crucified. It must rise again from its death, from its spell. Where can it come to life again? Only in the soul of the initiated man. I'm not initiated, it is in me. I'm not initiated. Well, I guess I am, but I was initiated by the Spirit, not by any person. I am not a part of any of the clubs, right? I'm not a Mason. I'm not Skull and Bones. I'm not Illuminati. I'm not any of those clubs. I have been initiated into the Order of Melchizedek, but that was a spiritual experience, and I cannot relay that to anyone else, right? I cannot initiate anyone else. I am not a leader among it. I am merely a member. And I have zero control, and as far as I know, there are no meetings. And so that's a little bit different. That is a little bit weird for some people, and that is fine. And so maybe it is only in the initiated man, but I doubt it very seriously, because God will find you where you are. He doesn't require you to come to him. Then wisdom finds its right relation to the cosmos. The resurrection, the liberation of God, that is wisdom. In the Timaeus, the development of the world is traced from the imperfect to the perfect. An ascending process is represented imaginatively. Beings are developed. God reveals himself in their development. Go back and watch my Timaeus. Like I hardly ever do it that bluntly, right? I point you to it, but I'm going to tell you now. If you are interested at all in what is being said here, go back to the source material. An ascending process is represented imaginatively. Beings are developed. God reveals himself in their development. Evolution is the resurrection of God from the tomb. Within evolution, man appears. Plato shows that in man there is something special. It is true the whole world is divine, and man is not more divine than other beings. But in other beings, God is present in a hidden way. In man, he is manifest. That is the self-insertion. You do not know that these dogs behind me are not better representatives of God than you are. You don't know that. You assume that because you believe that because you can think, you are a better representative. But that is not necessarily the case. At the end of Timaeus, we read, "And now we might assert that our study of the universe has attained its end, for after the world was provided and filled with mortal and immortal living beings, it, this one and only begotten world, has itself become a visible being, embracing everything visible, and an image of the Creator. It has become the God, perceptible to the senses, and the greatest and best world, the fairest and most perfect which there could be." Okay, we're in the most perfect world that could be. But this one and only begotten world would not be perfect if the image of its creator were not to be found amongst the images it contains. This image can only be engendered in the human soul. Not the Father himself, but the Son, God's offspring, living in the soul, and being like unto the Father, him man can bring forth. God is all things. God is me, God is you, God is the space between me and you, and the space between me and you. He is everything you can see and everything that you cannot. He is every single atom in the entirety of existence. That is God. He does not manifest fully within the world itself. He has never been in corporeal form any more than he is within me and you. We are tiny little slivers of God, each and every one of us, but not a single one of us his representative in full, right? None of us are his incorporation. None of us have ever been or ever will be. If you can see it or ever have been able to see it, it is not the entirety of God. You cannot see the entirety of the cosmos, much less for the entirety of the cosmos to appear before you. Philo, of whom it is said that he was resurrected, Plato characterized as the Son of God, the wisdom born out of man. No, he was not. Which lives in the soul and contains the reason existing in the world. Now, I do not discount reincarnation. It is entirely possible that the soul, being the eternal thing that it was somewheres and it will go somewheres. Forever is a very long time, and it's kind of boring. So I am sure that when you are there, you're like, you know what, I'm coming back. As a matter of fact, my entire philosophy on life is built around that. And that is me self-inserting. So take it as you will. But I believe that we were somewhere prior to being here, being eternal souls and all. And we decided to come here to learn lessons, and that we decided to teach each other lessons. Each and every person that you have ever met, you have decided with them to learn lessons. Me and these dogs decided to learn lessons, right? And so everything that you do has a lesson attached. That is part of it. We are here for that. To learn, to grow, to be, to do more. So yes, the soul is eternal. And so yes, it is entirely possible that Philo was indeed a reincarnated Plato. But he wouldn't have known that. That's one of the rules. You are limited from that. Are there ways to learn? I don't know. It is entirely possible that some of this hypnotism is actually doing that, but a lot of it is self-suggested. It is merely you completing something that you think about already. So I don't discount the fact that it is possible to be reincarnated, but I doubt very seriously that we know that Philo was a resurrected Plato. I doubt that very seriously. All right. This cosmic reason, or logos, appears as the book in which everything in the world is recorded and delineated. It also appears as the Son of God, following in the paths of the Father and creating forms, looking at their archetypes. Right. And we're going to stop here, right? Logos, that is completely misinterpreted. It is the creative utterance of God. It is not necessarily a soul as the word. And I know, right? The Gospels, we went through that. We did the word study. This logos is the exact same intention as when God said, I am light in the beginning. And if you don't know that God said, I am light, you again just don't know. You have not paid attention to what is actually contained in the book, because when he spoke into existence, he said, I am. He said, I am light, and it is good. And he said, I am the separation between the waters, and it is good. He said that repeatedly, and that was the logos. That was the logos. That was the logos. That word that he spoke was the I am, and he became. That was the logos. Not anybody who actually incorporated on the earth. That was not the logos. The logos was the creative utterance of God. That's what was with God, and that's what was of God. Was the creative utterance of the earth. Like that, okay? Okay. It also appears as the Son of God, following in the paths of the Father and creating forms, looking at their archetypes. The Platonizing Philo addresses this logos as Christ. As God is the first and only King of the universe, the way to him is rightly called the royal road. Consider this road to be philosophy, the road which the company of the ancient ascetics took, who turned away from the entangling fascination of pleasure and devoted themselves to the noble and earnest cultivation of the beautiful. The law names this royal road, which we call true philosophy, God's word and spirit. Well, that is not saying the same thing you just said. He said, addresses it as Christ. That is not what this says. It says that God is the first and only King of the universe. I agree. The way to him is rightly called the royal road. Okay, that is something you can say. Consider this road to be philosophy. Okay, we will make that assumption. The road which the company of the ancient ascetics took is not necessary to the conversation, who turned away from the entangling fascination of pleasure and devoted themselves to the noble and earnest cultivation of the beautiful. That is a little more relevant, but not even. The law names this the royal road, which we call the true philosophy, God's word and spirit. That does not say anything about Christ. That is not mentioned in there at all. That is a self-insertion that you placed in there. It is like an initiation to Philo when he enters upon this path in order to meet the Logos, who, to him, is the Son of God. or is God himself, from what he just said. I do not shrink from relating what has happened to me innumerable times. Often, when I wished to put all my philosophical thoughts in writing, in my accustomed way, and saw quite clearly what was to be set down, I nevertheless found my mind barren and rigid, so that I was obliged to desist without having accomplished anything, and seemed to be hampered with idle fancies. At the same time, I could not but marvel at the power of the reality of thought, with which it rests to open and to close the womb of the human soul. Another time, however, I would begin empty and arrive without any trouble at fullness. Thoughts came flying like snowflakes or grains of corn, invisibly from above, and it was as though divine power took hold of me and inspired me, so that I did not know where I was, who was with me, who I was, or what I was saying or writing. For just then the flow of ideas was given me as a delightful clearness, keen insight, and lucid mastery of material, as if the inner eye were able to see everything with the greatest distinctness. And again, that mentions nothing about Christ, but it does talk about God. Right? The path of creativity, right? I have embarked upon creative endeavors, right? I don't just do this. I have a game that I am building. I have written a book. I have other storylines that I have developed, and it is this path, right? It is something that kind of flows through you. You can set some of the keystones, but for the most part, the story comes from somewhere else. It is indeed like that, even to the point of not allowing you to do the thing, because I sit down at the game and it's like something is not right because it is not ready, and I'm not able to work. Even if I know what needs to come next, I'm not able to do it. And then I find out, oh, well, there was something that was necessary prior to you doing that. And that's literally how the process works. This is a description of a path to knowledge so expressed that we see that anyone taking this path is conscious of flowing in one current with the divine when the Logos becomes alive within him. This is also expressed clearly in the words, when the spirit, moved by love, takes its flight into the most holy, soaring joyously on divine wings, it forgets everything else and itself. It only clings to and is filled with that of which it is the satellite and servant, and to this it offers the incense of the most sacred and chaste virtue. There are only two ways for Philo. Either man follows the world of sense, that is, what observation and intellect offer, in which case he limits himself to his personality and withdraws from the cosmos, or he becomes conscious of the universal cosmic force and experiences the eternal within his personality. He who wishes to escape from God falls into his own hands, for there are two things to be considered, the universal spirit, which is God, and one's own spirit. The latter flees and takes refuge in the universal spirit, for one who goes beyond his own spirit says that it is nothing and connects everything with God. But one who avoids God abolishes the first cause and makes himself the cause of everything which happens. I fully attribute everything that happens to God. The Platonic view of the universe sets out to be knowledge, by which its very nature is also religion. It brings knowledge into relation with the highest to which man can attain through his feelings. Plato will only allow knowledge to hold good when feeling may be completely satisfied in it. It is then, more than science, it is the substance of life. It is a higher man within man, than man of which the personality is only an image. Within man is born a being who surpasses him, a primordial, archetypical man. And this is another secret of the mysteries brought into expression in the Platonic philosophy. Hippolytus, one of the early fathers, alludes to this secret. This is the great secret of the Summathericians, who were guardians of a certain mystery cult, which cannot be expressed and which only the initiates know. But these latter speak in detail of Adam, the primordial, archetypical man. I bet they didn't give him this name, though. The Platonic dialogue on love, or the symposium, also represents an initiation. Here, love appears as the herald of wisdom. I have not done either one of these two, so I don't know. If wisdom, the eternal word, the Logos, is the son of the eternal creator of the cosmos. It's not. Love is related to the Logos as a mother. Before even a spark of the light of wisdom can flash up in the human soul, a dim impulse or desire for the divine must be present in it. Unconsciously, the divine must draw man to what afterwards, when raised into his consciousness, constitutes his supreme happiness. What Heraclitus calls the demon in man is connected with the idea of love. In the symposium, people of the most various ranks and views of life speak about love. The ordinary man, the politician, the scientific man, the satiric poet Aristophanes, and the tragic poet Agathon. They each have their own view of love, in keeping with their different experiences of life. The way in which they express themselves shows the stage at which their demon has arrived. By love, one being is attracted to another. The multiplicity, the diversity of the things into which divine unity was poured, aspires towards unity and harmony through love. Thus, love has something divine in it, and owing to this, each individual can only understand it as far as he participates in the divine. After these men, and others at different degrees of maturity, have given utterance to their ideas about love, Socrates takes up the word. He considers love from the point of view of a man in search of knowledge. For him, it is not a divinity, but it is something which leads man to God. Eros, or love, is for him not divine, for God is perfect, and therefore possesses the beautiful and good. But Eros is only the desire for the beautiful and good. He thus stands between man and God. He is a demon, a mediator between the earthly and the divine. It is significant that Socrates does not claim to be giving his own thoughts when speaking of love. He says he is only relating what a woman once imparted to him as a revelation. It was through mantic art that he came to his conception of love. Diotima, the priestess, awakened in Socrates the demonic force which was to lead him to the divine. She initiated him. This passage in the Symposium is highly suggestive. Who is the wise woman who awakened the demon in Socrates? That happened when he was a child. His parents brought him to have that happen. If you don't know that, you have not read through the book or the writings. She is more than merely a poetic mode of expression, for no wise woman on the physical plane could awaken the demon in the soul unless the demonic force were latent in the soul itself. It is surely in Socrates' own soul that we must also look for this wise woman. But there must be a reason why that which brings the demon to life within the soul should appear as an outward being on the physical plane. The force cannot work in the same way as the forces which may be observed in the soul as belonging to and native to it. We see that it is the soul force which precedes the coming of wisdom, which Socrates represents as a wise woman. And again, this is not what it says. Right? This is a deliberate misrepresentation of what is being said in there, just the same as he did in Timaeus when he was talking about the initiation. His parents, when he was a child, brought him to the oracle, the wise woman, who alerted them to the fact that there was already this demon invested in him. And this demon guided him throughout his entire life. And that is not the Christian concept of a demon. It is the voice. Now, we talked in the last one how I believe that was the Holy Spirit, that he was consecrated to the Holy Spirit for the entirety of his life, that he heard that voice from the Holy Spirit. This is a deliberate misrepresentation of what is being stated in Plato. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is not what it says. It is the mother principle which gives birth to the Son of God, wisdom, the Logos. The unconscious soul force which brings the divine into the consciousness is here represented as the feminine element. The soul, which as yet is without wisdom, is the mother of that which leads to the divine. This brings us to an important conception of mysticism. The soul is recognized as the mother of the divine. Unconsciously, it leads man to the divine with the inevitableness of a natural force. This conception throws light on the view of the Greek mythology taken in the mysteries. The world of the gods is born in the soul. Man looks upon what he creates in images as his gods. But he must force his way through another conception. He must transmute into divine images the divine force which is active within him before the creation of those images. Behind the divine appears the mother of the divine, which is nothing else than the original force of the human soul. Thus, side by side with the gods, man represents goddesses. Let us look at the myth of Dionysus in this light. Dionysus is the son of Zeus and a mortal mother, Semele. Zeus wrests the still immature child from its mother when she is slain by lightning, and shelters it in his own side till it is ready to be born. Hera, the mother of the gods, incites the Titans against Dionysus, and they tear him in pieces. But Pallas Athene rescues his heart, which is still beating, and brings it to Zeus. Out of it he engenders his son for the second time. In this myth, we can accurately trace a process which is enacted in the depths of the human soul, interpreting it in the manner of the Egyptian priest who instructed Solon about the nature of myths. We might say it is related that Dionysus was the son of a god and of a mortal mother, that he was torn in pieces and afterwards born again. This sounds like a fable, but it contains the truth of the birth of the divine and its destiny in the human soul. The divine unites itself with the earthly, temporal human soul. As soon as the divine Dionysic element stirs within the soul, it feels a violent desire for its own true spiritual form. Ordinary consciousness, which once again appears in the form of the female goddess Hera, becomes jealous at the birth of the divine out of the higher consciousness. It arouses the lower nature of man, the Titans. This still immature divine child is torn in pieces. Thus the divine child is present in man as intellectual science broken up. But if there be enough of the higher wisdom, Zeus, in man to be active, it nourishes and cherishes the immature child, which is then born again as a second son of a god, Dionysus. Thus, from science, which is the fragmentary divine force in man, is born undivided wisdom, which is the Logos, the Son of God, and of a mortal mother, of the perishable human soul, which unconsciously aspires after the divine. As long as we see all this merely a process in the soul, and look upon it as a picture of this process, we are a long way from the spiritual reality which is enacted in it. In this spiritual reality, the soul is not merely experiencing something in itself, but it has been released from itself and is taking part in a cosmic event, which is not enacted within the soul, in reality, but outside of it. Platonic wisdom and Greek myths are closely linked together. So too are the myths and the wisdom of the mysteries. The created gods were the object of popular religion. The history of their origin was the secret of the mysteries. No wonder that it was held to be dangerous to betray the mysteries, for thereby the origin of the gods of the people was betrayed. And a right understanding of that origin is salutary. A misunderstanding is injurious. And that's going to wrap it up. I disagree with this last part as well, right? But I've explained my reasoning several times already in this one, so I don't really feel the need to expound upon it too much. But this is, again, a self-insertion. This is assuming that you know the intent behind the creation of the myths, and you don't. It is entirely possible that they are based in fact, and it is something that we just lost. Now, is that likely? Not really, but it is entirely possible. It's possible that this is a simile for the mysteries, but in my experience, it's not. Once this awakening process happens, there are attacks, but they are not the grand scale attacks that are described, right? You do become something new. You do learn new things. You grow and mature and expand in many ways, but I'm not happy with the way that he described that, and I've already talked about it enough, and we're already getting long, so Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat complicated topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional views and that I have a tendency to step on toes whenever I lay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. There were deliberate attempts to miseducate you in this book. I have no doubt whatsoever that many people have been miseducated, because you will read Plato said this, and then you will read the passage and you will think that that is what he has meant, but it is not. We have done the readings. We have talked about them extensively already, and there are many reasons, scientifically proven reasons, to go with the original intent behind it and not this interpretation of it. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. Let me know if you agree or disagree. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work that you would like to see me work through in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the comments down below. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.